Thank you very much, Hutch. Appreciate it. Appreciate the opportunity to be here with you guys today. So thank you. Okay, so I feel like Hutch talks on like 2x speed. Like here in Silicon Valley, I'm from San Antonio, Texas, so we got the drawl. It goes slower, right? So I'm going to try to give my 40-minute talk in 20 minutes here. So I wrote a book. Quick background story for me. I was at USA for 20 years, which I think a lot of you know are a very innovative company. Shout out to my USA folks in the back. Woohoo! I just saw a lot of things kind of in that role, and I just wanted to put it on paper. So I literally opened a Word document called Brain Dump, and I just put it all out there, and then I tried to give it some structure and some format, created an outline. It was about 60 pages long, took it to my friends that are a publisher at Insurance Nerds, and kind of did paint by numbers is what I tell people, just fill it out, and boom, 300-page book. I kind of started the writing of the book with a road trip with my dad last summer in earnest, once I had done that outline. And I went to see my dad. He's 84 years old. He has a baby sister that was literally born the day he graduated from high school, so she's in her mid-60s, and she lives in upstate New York. So we drove from South Texas all the way up there. And so I said, Dad, I'll give you one road trip. I'll take time off of work, and we'll go up together. And when I went to go pick up my dad, he had all these paper maps. Now, I remember as a kid, we would go on these road trips, and I loved drawing maps. I've got drawings like when I was 4 years old, city of Buffalo, right, and kind of all this stuff. I was fascinated. But I was like, what are you doing with all these paper maps, Dad? Because we're going to use GPS, right? And I have this particular GPS screen up. Now, the timing wasn't exactly the same, but we were actually driving back, and we had been on the road for 11 days. I wanted to get back to my wife, my 3 children. I was starting work the very next day. It was a Sunday. I just wanted to get back home. And so we're here kind of in the southern tip of Illinois, and I'm like, Dad, I'm going to go through Memphis and Arkansas, right, on I-20 and I-30 through Dallas and go home. And he goes, no, too many trucks on the road. That's a really slow way to go. Lots of traffic, accidents, construction. It's always under construction. I think we should go through the Ozarks. And I was like, Dad, in the world of paper maps, we could have this debate, and we wouldn't know who was right. But this is real-time data, right? And at that time, actually, the slower route was 4 hours slower. So that 4 hours made a big difference to me. It was a difference between getting home right about midday, being able to spend the afternoon with my kids, have dinner with my family, spend a little time before I went back to work on Monday, and getting there really late at night after dinner, right? Maybe being able to get there in time to say goodnight to bed. And we went back and forth. Like I said, this isn't a debate. This is real-time data, right? But my dad just couldn't get out of the paper world, right? So I'm kind of making the transition here to insurance. And I know we all think we know the problems with insurance. I put them in 7 broad categories, and I call it 7 fatal flaws of insurance. It's too expensive. You're spending a lot of money. You know, oftentimes it's the biggest cost, right, other than your car payment or your mortgage payment. It's significant expense to people. People pay the water bill because the water has to be on. They pay the electric bill, the electricity's got to be on. They pay insurance because they have to have insurance, but what are they getting for that, right? It's not an obvious value. It's too confusing, right? When I try to use it, oh, your policy doesn't cover that, and it's really difficult for people to use. Again, it's not, turning the light switch on or flushing the toilet. I'm paying money, but I'm getting an obvious benefit out of these things. It's too easy to game the system. One of the reasons it's too confusing is because, right, we kind of base on indemnity. We don't want anybody to be better off or worse off, and so we've got to do this claims adjustment process and whatnot. We got bad faith, and so there's just a lot of opportunity to game the system, which causes the need for checks and balances and contractual language, and it's just it adds to the confusion. It's a cash drain. It's like a junk bond, right? Like, I have to pay the money up front, like the liquidity. I can't just put it on a credit card of like when I incur the expense, then I put it on my credit card, and then I can decide how I want to pay that credit card off, if I want to pay it off all at once or slowly over time. I'm forced to pay every month, right, out of my liquid cash, but the opportunity or the chance I'm going to get a return on that investment is really low, right? Maybe 5% chance that I have a claim. That's a terrible investment. If I went to an investment professional, they would say, you shouldn't invest in insurance, right? You're paying all this money that's a certain thing for a 5% likelihood you'll get a payoff at the end. It doesn't cover all causes of loss, right? Flood insurance, probably the classic example there. It doesn't cover everything or everyone. So if you solve a part of any one of these 7 challenges, you're going to have a viable business because the insurance industry is so massive, so large. It's measured in billions and really even trillions of dollars if you talk about the industry in general. So I find this is like, my book in one slide, right? And you're like, this isn't a very exciting slide, Rob. And that's exactly my point. In the last 10 years, the expense ratio, so that out of every dollar of premium that we spend, what percentage goes to expenses? It's flatline between 26 and 27.5%. It has not budged. There's no efficiency in the market. Premiums have gone up quite a bit over this time, and expenses have gone up exactly in pace. So when you ratio those two, you get a flat line. Compare it to the credit card industry, right? You've got banks, you've got the Visa and MasterCard, you have fraud, it's a highly regulated industry. That costs us like 3%, not 30%. It's not a 10x the way it is in insurance. So I don't know that we'll ever get to 3% as an industry, but we should be in single digits. This shouldn't happen. It shouldn't spend so much of the money of premium dollars towards expenses. We have to find a way to become more efficient. And so that's really the challenge from a startup standpoint that you have an opportunity to solve. The other thing I would say is, right, on this list, this is the top 10 list of P&C carriers. The youngest carrier, was founded in 1937. Now, if I were to pull up practically any other industry, you would not see that kind of longevity, right? You think about Sears, right? Think about Blockbuster. That wasn't even a thing. Then Blockbuster comes, right? And then it gets replaced. It fails. The longevity, the staying period of insurance is just really remarkable. And you can see that two ways. You can say this is a really stable industry. It's a conservative industry. A friend of mine said, Rob, the reason that all these old companies are on there is because all the non-conservative companies, they failed, right? They went belly up. But you could also see there's a huge opportunity, right? And I would ask the question is this list going to look the same in 20 years from now? And I would argue that it will not look the same 20 years from now. The paradigm shift that's really before us is that we're on an exponential curve, and sorry, this is kind of hand-drawn, so I get arguments, well, that's not exponential. Okay, I did my best effort here, right? History is a big thing in insurance. We talk about how old the industry is. We talk about the staying power of those companies. We talk from an actuarial standpoint. I need data, right? 3 to 5 years of history, loss reserves up to 15 years. I need all this data and historical data to be able to project forward, right? For those of us that have worked in the industry for 20, 30, 40 years, we use that experience and the changes that we've seen over time to project forward. So I've been in the industry 20 years, so I'm using my 20 years of experience and saying, have seen change over 20 years. I'm going to project forward what that change looks like in the next 20 years. But the mistake is that the change I've seen in the last 20 years looks more like that linear change, but I'm really on an exponential curve. We see it all around us in every other aspect of our lives. And that is actually going to not prepare me for the next 20 years. I need to have an exponential mindset. And so somebody that actually has only 2 to 3 years of experience in this industry, is brand new, is fresh to this industry, they're getting it kind of right where that transition from the green to the red, so they have less experience, but they actually have more relevant experience because they're seeing the steepness of the curve and how quickly things are changing. So this is the mindset, particularly from a traditional carrier side, that we need to change. So I told you a little bit about my dad and the maps and GPS. So let me tell you about my daughter. We outfitted Amazon Echoes throughout the house for Christmas, kind of a Christmas present to ourselves. And so when I interact with Alexa, it's very transactional. Alexa, what's the weather going to be? Alexa, who won the basketball game last night? So when my daughter Sienna, who's 9, has the Alexa in her room, it's a very different experience. Her room is right above our master bedroom with my wife and I. And she is constantly talking all day. And my wife and I are like, who is she talking to? She's talking to Alexa. She says, Alexa, what's the temperature at 10:15 a.m.? Because that's when recess is. She wants to know whether she needs a short sleeve shirt or a long sleeve shirt. She asks Alexa to play music. But she's also asking Alexa to tell her jokes and to tell her bedtime story. These are the things I wouldn't imagine that Alexa could do, right? It's my 9-year-old that has the imagination to say, Alexa goes way beyond just a transactional. It's an immersive experience. And so she's having this running conversation day after day in her room with Alexa. That's really the challenge from, again, that traditional carrier side, that we tend to kind of think of insurance in a certain way with certain verticals, underwriting, claims, pricing. And a lot of the new business models that are enabled by new technologies, it's really hard for us to get over the hump. I mean, we see the tech and it seems cool, but a lot of what's holding us back in terms of really making a difference in this industry isn't the technology, it's not money, it's not people, it's the failure of imagination. Now, I have a friend from Germany, and so I'm not going to take credit for this. This is really his statement that insurance is the perfect digital product. And I think about a company like Tesla. You know, you're Elon Musk and you're Tesla, and you're trying to compete with the Fords and the GMs and the Mercedes of the world, right? There's a lot of physical infrastructure that you have to invest in. You've got to go all the way out in the Nevada desert and build the gigafactory, and it's $1 billion of physical capital that you have to invest. I don't have any of that in insurance. I don't have to worry about big supply chains and having to ship stuff from Vietnam and all these places over, right? I don't have to worry about all this stuff. It's all bits, I mean, yes, insurance was invented 300 years ago, but if you were to design a perfect digital product, I don't know that you could do a lot better than insurance if you were to design a free, to start today. There's 3 barriers that make it very difficult for new entrants in this space, though, because that's what you're wondering. You're like, okay, I'm not starting an airline. This isn't JetBlue, and I've got to compete, right? And I've got to secure all the Boeings and all that. So what are those barriers to entry? Why haven't we seen more disruption? It's really that need for trust, right, is the first one. Consumers have to have trust in insurance. I'm paying this premium in the hopes that when I have a claim, you're going to be there for me. The reliance on historical data we've talked about, and then the lack of consumer engagement. Insurance is the type of product that you do because you want to do something else, right? I want to drive this car off the dealer's lot, so I have to get insurance before I can do that. I want to buy this new house, so I've got to get insurance so I can close on my mortgage. And once you've checked that box and you've acquired insurance, you move on, right? It went up being 40th on your list of things to do to number 1, and then quickly to 400th, right, if not 4,000th. So as we are here today, and as we think about this is just a sample of some of the technologies that are out there. And this is really the challenge on both sides, right? On the traditional side and on the startup side, is using some of these new emerging technologies to help overcome those barriers to our industry. So for the need for trust, blockchain, right? Smart contracts, peer-to-peer enablers. We see this with Uber, right? You'd never get in a car with a stranger. Well, now we do it all the time. The reliance on historical data. I don't need historical data, and I don't need proxy variables like age, gender, and marital status to rate driving, because I can observe the actual driving behavior. You know, we all grow up in the insurance industry, and we know that a 35-year-old female drives better than an 18-year-old male. But we can also probably know people personally in our lives where that 35-year-old female is not such a hot driver, and that 18-year-old male is a very responsible driver, right? But we put them into groups, we pool the risk, and so we speak in generalities. Well, now I know, I don't care, right? I know exactly how they drive because I've got the telematics, or I've got the sensors in the home, or I've got the aerial imagery. I know that there's actually a pool in the backyard, and I know that pool is fenced or not fenced, and I know that has a child lock on it or not. And then, you know, I don't have to worry about just generalized linear modeling or approved actuarial techniques. I can run hundreds of algorithms, right, and kind of see different outcomes and kind of see, you know, how they rate and which is the most predictive model. I can create more simple, elegant user interfaces, more immersive app experiences for consumers, particularly as the value proposition goes from helping you manage your risks rather than just financially give you a payment when the worst happens. I tell people, you know, those are great business models, right? But I don't know that consumers are ready. You know, we all probably have that friend that we have dinner with maybe every 2 to 3 years, an old college friend or whatever. And all of a sudden that college friend wants to go to lunch every day. It's like, we don't have that kind of relationship, right? There's a reason you're that friend I only see every 3 years. But that's kind of what insurance companies that are kind of getting in that space of wanting to do, right? And I think there's an opportunity for startups that I don't have a preconceived notion of what this relationship is. To help enable those type of interactions. So I want to give you a very quick, concrete example of what I'm talking about. There's hundreds of examples that I could give you. So I went storm chasing, and you can look it up. There's a kind of Rob Goes storm chasing. It was weird. I'm going into the dark clouds instead of away from the dark clouds. The underwriter in me is like, And so, we were picking up, I was with the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety, and so they wanted to actually observe hail. If you think about it, when hail happens, right, it melts, like that data goes away very quickly, and so they had to be on the ground, and they wanted to create the world's largest database of hailstones so that they could replicate it in their lab environment and test different building materials to see which were resistant to hail and not hail. And so today, from an insurance company, if I'm trying to triage right after a hail event from a claims perspective, I'll look at like a radar swath. So I've got the radar kind of there, and it's like, okay, this is approximately where the hail happened. But we know that you could have 2-inch hail at a house, and 3 houses down, they didn't see anything at all, right? But the radar swath makes it look like a big old bullseye happened right here. So some people are talking about, well, you know what, we're going to put observational devices on the top of commercial structures as kind of a sampling, right, throughout an urban area. So we kind of know, and we can draw a distance from the house to that, and we kind of know much better than the radar image. It's not that pure bullseye. We have a much better sense for what's happened. But then another company is out there, and they're saying, why do I need to just sample the actual observed hail behavior, right? I can actually put a hail pad that's kind of like a solar pad on every single roof, and I can tell you precisely when the hail started, when it happened, if it was a deluge of pea-sized hail, if it was 2-inch hail, but it was just like 1 or 2 pings on the roof. I can tell you exactly what happened at that house. I can potentially reach out to that customer and say, hey, just noticed that you got nailed with a bunch of hail 2 minutes ago. How's it going? Do you see any holes, damage? Do you want to start the claims process right away? And so, again, that's one of many, many, many examples that technology is enabling us today to think much differently. Opportunities are everywhere, and there's just some list of things. I want to give a little bit of love to Back Office. I was meeting with a gentleman from Monday that is kind of from the telecom background. He does a lot with machine learning. He's been at Google and whatnot. He read my book and he's interested, right? And I said, billing and document management behind the scenes, that doesn't get a lot of love, right? But that's probably a big opportunity. It's a huge expense. And so anyway, there's just tons of opportunities in any one of these verticals. Daniel Schreiber, who most of you know, right, is the founder of Lemonade. He said this recently in a podcast. He didn't say it exactly this way, but I love this quote. He said, what attracted to him to the insurance industry was 3 things. That it was massive, right, in terms of the size of the opportunity. The fact that it was unloved by consumers. So it's huge, and we know a lot of the big name brands, but nobody really loves their insurance carrier, right? And he said it was unspoiled by innovation. I love that term, unspoiled by innovation. And so that's the opportunity that we have before us today. That's what Daniel Schreiber saw in our industry, and that's the opportunity that's before all of us today. So just some thoughts on kind of success, right? Where do we go from here? This is the term I use, less weightlifting, more yoga, right? It's really about not just brute strength, huge core legacy systems, right? Cranking out kind of, insurers or one of the original big data companies. But it's really about flexibility. It's about, I talk about your KPIs should be measured by how many APIs do you have? How many things can you integrate? Because you guys are creating new inventions, each and every day. There's new startups, there's new propositions. And so from a carrier perspective, it's like you want to take advantage of those opportunities. That flexibility is key. It's not about brute strength anymore. It's really about flexibility, being able to integrate new solutions into your ecosystem to offer new products, new services to your customers and grow. Risk transfer reimagined, right? So Uber didn't create a new taxi company. Airbnb didn't create a new hotel company, right? So I would like to see kind of almost negative innovations. Strip insurance down to its core. We know that it's been coats of paint over years and years, and so that's what gives that trust is kind of that legal framework and foundation. We know how these products work, and we know how they're handled in courts and things like that, but there's probably other ways to think about it that I don't think a lot of people are kind of, on the edges, right, of kind of one of those 7 fatal flaws, but I do think there's an opportunity to do even more kind of core rethinking about the product. Beware the guaranteed innovation killers. I tell people this, like, there might be a core claim system that a carrier has, right? And then somebody says, I'll give you the exact same functionality at 1/10 of the cost. And from a carrier perspective, I'd be like, that's not worth it because this is my claim system. I don't want to mess with my people. This is a critical system, right? So I think that's where it's really important from a startup and from a carrier to have these conversations that we're going to be having today and ongoing to understand, yeah, that might sound like a good problem and a good value prop, but that's actually not where an opportunity lies. So I do think there's kind of some innovation killers out there. And then, again, the war for talent and building a diverse, inclusive culture, because, again, right, the flow of ideas is important. So the questions that I'll kind of leave you with, what parts of the insurance ecosystem are going to be disrupted, by what technologies, how soon, and how quickly. And I'll leave you with one final thought, and that is that the world deserves a great insurance product. And it's our responsibility to go out and to make it better. You can find out a lot more about the book, my quick 10-second plug. It's at endofinsurance.com. It's exclusively available on Amazon. There's a paperback or a Dead Trees version as well as a Kindle version. And I've left a couple copies here at Plug and Play, so if you want to borrow it and kind of read it and turn it back in as a library, you're certainly welcome to do so. And then again, you guys can find me across a lot of different social media. I'm going to be here. I have to unfortunately step out in a little bit for lunch. I may or may not be back. So if you don't get an opportunity to talk to me today, happy to connect with you over LinkedIn and schedule a call or talk more. So thank you very much for having me come today.